All right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started here in just a minute. We'll give folks about another minute to get logged on. Rick, we still have quite a few people in the waiting room coming in, so let's give them maybe one more minute and then I'll turn it over to you. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are going to go ahead and get started. We'll keep checking on the waiting room here to let folks in, but we want to make sure that we're staying on time. So we'll go ahead and kick off our second annual virtual Colorado Resiliency Summit. Thank you all for being here. And with that, I'm going to introduce Rick Garcia, our Executive Director of the Department of Local Affairs, to give us some opening remarks. So Rick, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shell. Well, welcome to the second annual Colorado Resiliency Summit. And this has been organized and hosted by the Colorado Resiliency Office, also known as the CRO. You know, this is a special year because it marks a decade of the CRO's existence. And we've been taking time today to celebrate how far we've come, but also looking ahead and what the future holds. We're proud to have just released the Colorado Resiliency Framework 2022 Annual Progress Report, which highlights progress on the resiliency priorities over the past year. And I want to thank everyone who worked so diligently to put this report together, and especially many of our state agencies here in the state of government that also have resiliency programs as part of their goals. We're also excited that over 300 people have registered for today's event. It all takes us all to complete the important work of resiliency in our state. Attending today are representatives and members from all across our state, including special members from the Colorado Indian communities, the Southern Ute and the Mountain Ute tribes, local governments, community-based organizations, and members of the general public, and many others. The work to move our state forward is not possible without the intentional, robust partnerships and collaboration from all Colorado communities. It also requires taking time to assess and plan for the risks and challenges we face not only today, but into the future. In addition to learning from the disruptions we have faced throughout our history and applying these solutions from the lessons we've learned, as well as identifying the levers of change to move us forward. I also want to comment that we are happy to be working in collaboration with the newly created Office of Climate Preparedness that was developed by Senate Bill 22206 that is launched in the governor's office. We thank you again for your participation today in the Colorado Resiliency Summit. And I also want to welcome and acknowledge some of our special inspirational keynote speakers that are on today's agenda. We look forward to navigating these challenges and finding solutions for a stronger, more resilient, robust Colorado. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's special guest appearance. We're very happy and honored to have Colorado's Poet Laureate return for a second year, who will be performing one of his original poems called On Justice. Please join me in welcoming Colorado's Poet Laureate, Bobby Lefebvre. Bobby?
Yes. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to be here with you all in community. And I really enjoy when art and poetry in particular are included in spaces like this, using poetry to jump off and center conversations. It's important, I think, to have artists and dreamers and philosophers and imaginers at the forefront of really contextualizing where we are collectively. And I think so much of resilience work centers on that, right? To help really design what the future might look like. And, I believe when I think of resilience, and adaptability, I don't really see them like many of you probably as reactionary. I believe that they are imaginative and generative processes. And as an artist, I really try to activate imagination, radical imagination, to adapt and change, but also it's a responsibility really for building a world that we have yet to see but long for. Because we know that outside of these virtual walls, right, there is a very beautiful but also broken and bleeding world that needs all of our hands and hearts more than ever. And at this moment in our nation's history, in our world's history, with all of these converging issues that impact us on a daily basis, it's time for us to make some choices, and we can't be indifferent, and we have to act. So all of you being here today is part of that. I have been thinking a lot lately about justice, that word. What does justice and freedom and liberation look like? What does justice mean? Who is it for? How does it show up in society, in love, in literature, in our hearts, in this work that we do around resilience, right? How do we get there? Is justice a destination? Is it a process? Is it an imaginary place? And some days I'm not sure, but I am committed to it in all of its forms as long as you all will make that commitment with me until we get there. And then after, this poem is called On Justice and Us. There are sweet bells ringing in the distance. From where we stand, the sound is faint but unmistakably beautiful. From where we stand, faith convinces us to listen to what we hunger to one day see. These bells of justice, recondite sounds, majestic as the Quetzal's coo. These recondite sounds, soothing as the lullaby the sunset sings as it slow dances across the horizon, and we run with hope and abandon in the direction of the chimes, traverse an American landscape that has made winners of some and bullseyes of others, traverse an American landscape that has been stolen, enslaved, and interred with bones and blood. Even still, we run feverishly toward the bells because on good days, we know the ideals that live where the music is promise equality, promise prosperity, promise liberty and justice for all our hearts, our compasses that point in the direction of freedom, our hands, shovels unafraid to dig into the dirt, our voices, keys we use to open doors not meant for us to walk through, our minds, luscious playgrounds where dreams and better tomorrows marry in the chapel of perseverance. For in the distance, maybe just outside of our reach, balanced scales beseech to be seen. In the distance, the sword Lady Justice wields in her right hand is not slashing disproportionately. In the distance, her blindfold has not yet slipped from her eyes. Beneficent is the red road that we have traveled, dignified the path that we have carved with promise. We are the fruit our ancestral roots dreamed into existence, flowers cultivated in the garden of hard work and sweat. Over a lifetime, the human heart beats more than 2 billion times without stopping. This means that we have 2 billion reasons to stretch our wings, to fly in the face of adversity, to dance amid the smoke, to love through all the hate. May boundaries be nothing more than invitations for exploration, a starting line from which we sprint in the direction of the uncharted, a catapult that launches us in the direction of the fruition of our dreams. May justice prevail. May it be not a fleeting illusion only pursued, but a beacon of virtue we attain tirelessly and justly together. For in the distance, the bells are still ringing, promise is calling, and we will not stop running until we arrive, until we all are free. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Bobby. As always, your words strongly resonate. Running to the bells, flying in the face of adversity, dreaming, that's what we're here to do today. And while we face significant disruptions in the last decade, we continue to face challenges ahead, we persevere and are stronger when we work together and leave no one behind. So thank you again for sharing your words to inspire the exchange of perspectives and ideas today. My name is Ann Miller, and I'm the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office. And thank you so much for joining us for the second annual Resiliency Summit. With today's theme, celebrating 10 years of resiliency in Colorado to 2033 and beyond, we will be looking back on how far we've come and looking forward to the work ahead to realize our vision. We will be asking ourselves, what can we plan for now that will set us up for many generations from now to a more adaptive, sustainable, forward-leaning Colorado. We have a packed agenda today that explores a variety of diverse resiliency topics. And we are taking a look back to understand what brought us here today while we're seeking to empower and inspire one another in this collective space, coming together to blaze a path forward into the next decade and beyond. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers today, including our keynote speakers that are sharing diverse perspectives from across Colorado. Our speakers include Dr. Nikki Gonzalez, Colorado's first Latina state historian, who will help us explore our state's history and our past and its nexus to resiliency. Vice Chairman Laura Lee Cloud from the Southern Ute Indian Tribe, one of Colorado's oldest and most continuous residents and stewards of this land, offer a tribal perspective as we consider the challenges and opportunities affecting resilience statewide. And Dr. Martine Carcassonne from Colorado State University's Center for Public Deliberation is here to help us move through wicked problems and polarizing challenges through intentional communication and connection. We're also really excited to have you join us for the second part of today's program, which includes 4 different breakout sessions where we will hear from subject matter experts from around Colorado and facilitate group dialogue. There's a common thread that ties our event together from our keynote speakers to this afternoon's breakout sessions, and that is looking at levers of change. What are those that we know of right now and that will have a future impact? And what are those that we have not yet dreamed of? In this collective space, we ask you to all get creative and look to the future. Next slide. Quick housekeeping notes that many of us are familiar with Zoom, but a few reminders for Zoom controls. And I'll just let you take a peek at those, and those are down at the bottom, those icons. We will be using the chat and encourage you in between after presentations to add comments. Okay, thanks. Next slide. As we look back over the last 10 years of the Colorado Resiliency Office, we celebrate the collective efforts from across the state and the strides we've made. The CRO has evolved over the last 10 years, with beginnings in the governor's office after the 2013 floods to 2018, when the office was created by statute and moved to the Department of Local Affairs, solidifying Colorado's commitment to this work. The Colorado Resiliency Framework, first of its kind in the nation, was developed in 2015 and identified those key strategies for moving forward. And that framework inspired the development of local resiliency frameworks, including early on Larimer and Boulder County.
Come on.
Over the last 10 years, we've aligned around resiliency priorities, forged stronger relationships, making us better able to tackle complex challenges together. We've strengthened local capacity through resiliency planning, resources, learning through toolkits, resources, and peer exchanges. And next slide. We updated the resiliency framework in 2020 in the midst of the global pandemic and 3 of Colorado's largest wildfires. This cross-sector framework takes a holistic approach to resilience, identifying strategies across 6 priority areas and 4 themes. You can see climate change and vibrant economies, social equity, and reducing risk to natural hazards are all part of woven into the work we do in those themes. We've seen historic federal and state funding recently, and Colorado is investing in wildfire mitigation, energy resilience, infrastructure, water conservation, housing, workforce development, and more. We're also excited to announce that we recently published our Framework 2022 Annual Progress Report that spotlights community success stories, exciting funding opportunities, and new programs from recent legislation. Please see the link in the chat to take a look at that report. A few highlights include the Resiliency and Recovery Roadmaps program. Some of you are on the call today, thank you. Bringing together 16 regional community teams in rural Colorado to prioritize their objectives through a 2-year planning and implementation process. We also have new resiliency-related funding programs. The list is so long, but microgrids for community resilience and the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Programs are a couple. While we've made progress and learned many lessons in the last decade, we have so much work ahead to do to realize the transformational changes needed to address our most pressing challenges. We thank you for your contributions to this important work and for joining us today. And we invite you to engage with us as we reflect and explore solutions to the future we want. It's my pleasure to introduce Shale Sabo, the CRO Resiliency Program Manager, who joined our team last summer and has done a wonderful job organizing this event. Thank you, Shale. I'll turn it over to Shale to introduce our keynote speakers and moderate the rest of the summit. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Anne. I am honored to be introducing our 2023 keynote speakers for today's summit. A key component of resiliency is approaching challenges from multiple different perspectives, identifying where opportunities of overlap occur across disciplines, and having a nuanced understanding of the historical context that led to our current situation in order to identify the best solutions for the future. We are very excited to have three fantastic speakers who will help us ground in these concepts. We are shaking up the traditional keynote speaker structure and are instead doing ours in a TED Talk style format. This was intentional so that we are able to provide more speakers and welcome more perspectives. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to present, and we will follow with a curated question and answer. We will not, unfortunately, have time to take questions from the audience for this portion of the agenda. However, we encourage you to do so during the breakout sessions this afternoon. Each of our speakers were presented with the following prompt. Please speak to the evolution of resiliency in Colorado from your perspective. What has resiliency looked like historically, and where do you see Colorado going into the future? What is an aspect of resilience we have not been focusing on, but should be? What levers of change should we be engaging? And where do you see opportunity for impact in the next 10 years? I will now introduce our keynote speakers. So first, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Nikki Gonzalez. Born in Denver, Nikki Gonzalez has deep roots in the coal mining and agricultural communities of northern and southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. Like so many Mexican Americans in this region, her grandparents moved to Denver during World War II for economic opportunities. She is the mom of two boys who are historians in their own right, Danny and Teddy. Nikki is a graduate of Yale University with a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature and CU Boulder with a PhD in American History. Currently, she serves as a professor of history and as vice provost for diversity and inclusion at Regis University. She is also a member of the State Historians Council and served as a Colorado State Historian from 2021 to 2022. She specializes in the history of the American West, specifically the history of the Sangre de Cristo land grant and the San Luis community's 160-year legal and cultural struggle to protect its historic land right. Her most recent projects include a historic context project, a collaborative project with the city of Denver, which will inform the city's historic preservation decisions, and an oral history of Chicano Vietnam veterans. Our next speaker will be Vice Chairman Lorelei Cloud. Lorelei Cloud is a member of the Southern Ute tribe. She is currently serving as the vice chairman in her third term on the Southern Ute Tribal Council. Previously, she has served as the vice chairman and treasurer. Lorelei also served a 2-year term as chairman of the 10 Tribes Partnership and is currently a member of the Water and Tribes Initiative, co-chair of the Indigenous Women's Leadership Network, and a board trustee for the Nature Conservancy. And our final keynote speaker today will be Dr. Martine Carcassonne, who is a professor in the Communication Studies Department of Colorado State University, the founder and director of the CSU Center for Public Deliberation, often known as the CPD, and a faculty member for CSU's recently developed Masters in Public Policy and Administration program. His research focuses on helping local communities address wicked problems more productively through improved public communication, community problem solving, and collaborative decision making. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Nikki Gonzalez to get us started.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction, Shale. And I want to also thank, in addition to Shale, Jemmy, Ann, Morgan for the invitation, and Executive Director Garcia, who is holding a summit like this, which I think is really important. So thank you very much. And in this 10 minutes, I'll draw upon some of the research projects that I've done that are all about seeing resilience in the past. And I will start with the personal. Let's see. I dedicate all of my public history work to my paternal grandmother, who I think was a model of resilience, Margaret Lujan Gonzalez. And unfortunately, I never was able to meet her, but I feel like through my study of the history of Colorado, that I have come to know her, and I have thus come to know myself even better. So I dedicate this work to her. And I want to start off with this quote from Dr. Taya Miles, who is a Harvard history professor. And this is from an article that she wrote in the New York Times last year. She said, "History is our best accumulated record of change and of how our species has borne up to the shocks of flood, famine, disease, exile, resource depletion, abuse, and war. History is also a golden repository of thought and action, a species-wide playbook for resiliency, recuperation, and even reinvention in response to societal disruption, moral failure, and collapse." So I thought that was an appropriate quote for today's presentation. And so starting with some of the projects that I've done, so along with Executive Director Garcia, I also serve on the governor's advisory council on renaming our geographical features in the state. And one of the ones that we advised him on and that he actually approved and the name has been changed is Chinaman Gulch. So an offensive term, Chinaman. So we consulted the community, and interestingly, the community, a group of Asian American leaders, came up with the suggestion of naming the gulch Resilience Gulch in Cantonese or in Chinese, and the pronunciation is in Cantonese. So it's Ern Sing Gulch. And it is to honor all of those Chinese immigrants who arrived in Colorado in the 1800s, who helped build the railroad, who mined, and in an atmosphere of xenophobia and racism, they persisted. And so they are a model of resilience. And then my main research is in Southern Colorado in the community of San Luis. And I have done a study on the history of the community's resistance to attempts to extinguish their historic land rights, which date back to the 1840s to a Mexican land grant when that land belonged to Mexico. And I include this because San Luis, the history of the community, interestingly, the first incorporated town in Colorado history, is really a great example of community resilience and individual resilience. So they spent 150 years defending and trying to win back rights that were unjustly taken from them. So through community activism, through the court system, finally they were granted through the Colorado Supreme Court those historic land rights. And that in itself is really an entire class on resilience. And at the same time that San Luis represents communal resilience, we also see individual examples of resilience as well. And I just want to highlight one woman whose story I encountered throughout my research and who I had the pleasure of interviewing a couple of times and becoming nice friends with her. And this is Agatha Medina. She's pictured here on her left with her lifelong friend, Jean Martinez, in her home, her mobile home in San Francisco, Colorado, which I jokingly refer to as a suburb of the small town of San Luis. And she was the first person in the entire community to sign on to the lawsuit in 1980, which was the final phase of the resistance, and eventually the lawsuit that eventually took the community to victory. And she stood about 4 feet tall. She had polio when she was a young girl, and she was a force. She was a firebrand, and she was a main reason why the community was able to win back its historic land rights and preserve its very unique culture. So she embodied resilience as well. And then I want to follow up with a quote from author John Nichols in his novel, The Milagro Beanfield War, where he writes about the resilience of the Spanish-speaking people. And the Milagro Beanfield War, I'm sure many of you have read it, is about defending water rights for a community in New Mexico. But he wrote that he was just amazed at the ability, particularly of the elderly Spanish-speaking people, to persist against all odds. They didn't have money, the political power. They didn't have any power with the courts. They just didn't give up. He said, call it stoic, stolid persistence of a community to sustain its land, its culture, its language, and its customs. So again, an expression through literature of that same phenomenon of resilience. And then finally, I want to spend the rest of the 10 minutes talking about a case study, my work with the city of Denver to research and really tell the history of Latino Denver through significant places historically. And this project was used to generate this historic context, which would be used to inform preservation decisions on a local level within the city limits. And one theme emerged from this research that I did, which was mostly oral history, but also archival, which was resilience. The resilience of the Latino, and I'll just use that term for simplicity here, the resilience of the Latino community over years of marginalization, limited opportunities, and structural racism to persist and to flourish. And I think so many lessons about resilience and persistence lay in that history. An example of that, so I just included this 1938 residential security map of the city of Denver, which shows redlining. So we hear a lot about the policy of redlining and how neighborhoods in cities across the United States were literally mapped out like this, according to, what groups lived in what areas, and decisions to sell property, decisions to lend mortgages were based on maps like this. And so if you lived in the red and the yellow areas of these maps, you were probably a brown or Black person, and you had zero access to mortgage funding. And so this is a way of segregating populations, and really, which would lead to, the wealth gap, and it would lead to neglect in these areas, and eventually to another form of racism, structural racism, which is gentrification and the disproportionate effects on communities of color. So that kind of sets the stage for this, one example of this structural racism in the city of Denver. And my point is that within this atmosphere of structural racism and marginalization, the Latino community was still able to persist because of an innate resilience. Within a system of limited financing, limited education, they expressed a strong entrepreneurial spirit. They built up businesses like restaurants and beauty salons, barbershops that didn't need a whole lot of investment. They were able to build up thriving business districts along Santa Fe Drive and along Larimer Street, despite the kind of atmosphere that they were operating within. They were able to thrive in the labor industries that were open to them, where they could get jobs, where they could move up in those companies. And two examples are Gates Rubber Company, which my paternal grandmother worked in during the Second World War, and the meatpacking industry, where they formed strong unions to try to advocate for their rights. And within this atmosphere as well, they formed mutual aid societies, mutualistas, and in this case, it's the Society for the Mutual Protection of United Workers, which was big in Southern Colorado and in Denver, which provided support for the community and support for families and individuals in that community in a society where they didn't have access to a lot of the general resources. I included this quote from Jesuit priest Father Greg Boyle, who operates Homeboy Industries in the city of Los Angeles, just to show that it's kinship and community that can really carry us through difficult times. Father Boyle works with gang members, recovering gang members, and in the city of Los Angeles. He said, what we've come to see as a community is that no kinship, no peace, no kinship, no justice, no kinship, no equality. No matter how singularly focused we may well be on those worthy goals, things can't happen unless there's some undergirding sense that we belong to each other. How can we stand against forgetting that? Another way that the Latino community in Denver and throughout Colorado was able to form this strong community was through sports. And so I included a couple of fun pictures here from the Friday night fights that people often look forward to a women's volleyball league in the I think this is the 1950s, and that's my grandmother on the top left-hand part of the photo. Further, the creation of community in other ways and expressions of patriotism through military service, through the organizations like the GI Forum that were formed because Mexican-American vets were excluded from more mainstream veteran organizations. And on the right, the Good American Organization, which was a strong civic organization here in Denver. And then, of course, one major expression of this is the politics of resistance. That, the politics of taking it to the streets, okay, through protest. And this is a 1970s photo from Broadway in Denver, United Farm Workers March. And so people taking it to the streets to advocate for themselves and their communities. And more photos here from the Chicano movement in the 1960s, formation of organizations like the Crusade for Justice, which is, expressions of this resilience and this struggle and perseverance. And then, that tradition continues as the Latino community has continued that tradition of activism and advocating for equal opportunity in employment, in access to education, against police brutality, and so forth, so many other causes. And then one other thing I found in the research was that our, not to say all Latinos are Catholic, but the Catholic influence, the Catholic churches provided a space for political organizing and for social justice outreach, and really became kind of centers of this community resilience, this community kind of mutual taking care of one another, and the formation of a community, a strong community. And these are three of the parishes that stood out through the research: Sacred Heart on Larimer Street, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and the pillar of the community, Father Jose Maria Lara, and then the St. Cajetan's Parish, which started off on the Auraria campus. Through the years, the Latino community has gained hard-fought seats at the political table. We see Pali Baca stand in Federico Pena, young Federico Pena on the left, standing with Cesar Chavez and Corky Gonzalez. And then on the right, Federico Pena being sworn in as Denver's first Latino mayor. And then our city council representatives in the middle more recently. We continue to tell these stories in creative ways through dance, through theater, and through the visual arts. And then finally, what our histories can teach us. So my conclusion, is a lot of information I just threw at you all, is that we carry our histories with us. And the piece of the Baldwin quote that I had on my first slide tells us that they form our frames of reference in ways that we may not even be aware of. We learn about ourselves and each other through knowing our history and one another's histories. Our histories teach us that we are resilient and that we have a reservoir of wisdom to draw upon, and that we have a responsibility to preserve and pass these stories on. So with that, I look forward to your comments. And just, I'd like to thank the following individuals and organizations for the images that I used today. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gonzalez. We extremely appreciate it. And with that, we will go ahead and turn it over to Vice Chairman Lorelei Cloud.
Thank you. First, I would just like to say that I'm very honored to be part of this this conference. It's such a great honor. I am from the Mowach and Kapota bands of Utes, and I focused a lot on our experience within the state of Colorado. So you can go to the next slide. And so first I want to define what resilience means. It's the ability to adapt and bounce back after a hardship or a setback. And for the Ute people, we've had no choice but to be resilient. Our people have been here since time immemorial. We believe our creation story starts here in the Rocky Mountains, and we are the longest continuous inhabitants of what is now known as the state of Colorado. This alone proves that we have been resilient. We have been adaptive to our environment for such a long time. We have been used to traveling with the seasons while we hunted and gathered our foods and medicines. And we only took what was necessary. And we never overharvest our animals or our plants. And we followed these principles closely to ensure that we took care of what the Creator gave to us, as well as providing and taking care of ourselves. You can go to the next slide. Through several events, we've had to concede our homelands and live on reservations. And we could no longer gather and hunt our foods in those places that we once knew and loved. And in 1868, we had a reservation that consisted of close to 56 million acres. Then in 1873, gold and silver was discovered in the San Juan Mountains, and my people once again were forced onto a smaller reservation. So now we live on a reservation that's in the southwest corner of the state of Colorado, that's 110 miles long and 15 miles wide. So it's not very big. And through all of these events, my ancestors have had to adapt to surviving in these new way of life. They've also had to ensure that our people never forgot our history. So they made sure that we understood exactly where we came from. You can go to the next slide. So currently we have a new environment that we've had to adapt to, and we have different areas that we need to focus on to sustain and remain resilient. Along with our sovereignty and our culture and traditions, we've had many different situations that we had to deal with that we never had to deal with before. And this is to keep our people thriving, and we focus on our health and housing, just like everybody else. We also focus on our youth and their safety. We are creating awareness around the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives movement, because this is something that is affecting all of Indian country. We are also focused on our water and our tribal water rights. And we also know that we need economic development to generate revenue so that we can keep our governmental operations running for our future. You can go to the next slide. We take pride in our Ute culture, and because we know that that is our identity. We have worked very hard to maintain our culture and our traditions and keeping our language viable. We are very proud that we have our own museum and cultural center, and this helps us to preserve and to promote our Ute way of life. We also have celebrated this past year our 100th annual Southern Ute Fair, and the theme was resilience, R-E-Z instead of R-E-S. So resilience has always been a theme for us to live by. You can go to the next slide. Our youth is very important to us. And to help our people maintain our Ute identity, we created our own Southern Ute Montessori Academy. We opened the doors in August of 2000, and this is a private school for our membership, and it serves children from birth to age 12. Our children receive a really good education along with a strong foundation in our Ute culture and our language. And we are very proud of our school. And along with that, we also have our youth at Sunshine Cloudsmith Youth Advisory Council, which is actually named after my grandmother. This council was developed to give our youth the voice that they need to develop the world around them, because we believe that we are going to be giving this world to them, so they should be involved in shaping it. And we also know that they are going to be our next generation of leaders, and we want to give them a jump start in the leadership and to have a good foundation to grow on. So you can go to the next slide. In our culture, we know that water is the essence of life, and we have a couple of areas that we focus on to maintain that life. One is the 1988 settlement that recognizes tribal water rights for all surface streams and tributary groundwater on the reservation, and this has helped us tremendously. Another area is the Animas La Prada project, or Lake Nighthorse, which is actually located on our driest side of our reservation. This reservoir holds our tribe's water from the Animas River, And there's a 1988 Settlement Act for this project. And in that act, it authorized the tribes to use this water for municipal, domestic, and irrigation. And because this project was such a controversial project, it was amended in 2000 with the 2000 Settlement Act. This amendment eliminated the irrigation component for this project. And remember, this is on my driest side of my reservation that needed the irrigation. So in return for giving up that aspect of the settlement, the tribe received $40 million with the requirement that $30 million of it be spent in partnership with the surrounding communities and other water projects. Again, the tribe still needs to remain resilient with this aspect because that ability to use the water for irrigation was removed. The tribe still had to develop a plan to use that water that was only for irrigation or for industrial and for municipal uses only. And so those uses must be cost effective because once one drop of water is removed from that reservoir, we have to start paying the operation and maintenance fees for that reservoir. So you can go to the next slide. Another major area of concern for us is the Pine River Irrigation Project, which was constructed in the late 1800s to 1900s. This project is in extreme disrepair. It's approximately 175 miles of canals, again, on this small strip of land. And only 15% is estimated to be in good condition. And the PRIP should be delivering about 12,000 acres, water to about 12,000 acres, and up to approximately about 400 water users, which includes 100 non-Indians and the town of Ignacio. But this reservoir cannot deliver that amount of water due to this disrepair. And there have been no major repairs made by the Bureau of Indian Affairs since the 1960s. So resiliency, again, comes in many different forms because there is a major need for this project. And because of that need, my tribe has invested some of our own funds to make some of these repairs in the couple last few years. And even though this project is owned by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, it is the BIA's trust responsibility to maintain this infrastructure, and they have not done that. In addition, our staff is continuously looking for different funding that we need to repair and maintain portions of this canal. So in this past year, we're so thankful that our staff was able to secure 2 grants from the Bureau of Reclamation to help us to assist with some of these repairs on this project. You can go to the next slide. We also have installed 2 water stations within the reservation boundaries. This one particular is located between our tribal clinic and our tribal offices. And this pumping station provides a place for all the people in the community to get safe drinking water that they haul to their homes. And it's just for a small fee. In addition, we also have a utilities department that delivers potable water to our tribal members within the reservation. And because of our checkerboard land status, sometimes those all of these things have become more difficult because of the different authorities that manage the different land statuses. Can you go to the next slide? We also have our Department of Natural Resources, and in that department, there's different divisions in there that are that take care of different aspects of the natural resources. And we're so thankful that they have the expertise that and they're able to be resourceful and resilient in coming up with different methods of dealing with our present day issues that we deal with, such as the drought. We have wildfires. We also, again, have the port infrastructure. And we do this and we have our staff to incorporate our Ute traditions along with everything that they do to help protect our natural resources. So you can go to the next slide. We also have what we call is our Southern Ute Growth Fund. This is our financial arm of the tribe. We know that it's important for us to have a diverse portfolio in case one investment doesn't do as good as the other. We do this so that we can maintain the funds that we need for our government to keep running and that we're able to continue to provide services for our people. You can go to the next slide. And so we know that resiliency is a part of our life, and we've always had to be resilient. In doing this, we've created different partnerships and collaborations to maintain and strengthen our sovereignty. And because we are located in the southwest corner of the state, which is very rural, many people still don't know that we exist, let alone that we are thriving. So we take every opportunity to educate local communities, other states, as well as federal agencies on who we are as Ute people, as well as the different situations that we deal with. And we're hoping that we can facilitate opportunities to collaborate as we're building these relationships. And because of our former leaders, that they worked so tirelessly years ago to build the relationship that we have now with the state of Colorado, which has become invaluable. We know that this is that we are that this relationship is different because most other tribes don't have a relationship with their respective states or other governments. And so we take pride in that relationship and what they have done to build that relationship. We are also determined to maintain our relationship with the state and other organizations so that we can continue to be moving forward and thriving. My tribe also must be continued to be invited in to participate in other policy making and with other stakeholders that affect our community and our Indian country as a whole. So we have many different issues that we deal with that I can talk about for a long time. And also for our Ute people, we will continue to make our homeland resilient and build a strong economy for our future generations. One day our future generations will look back and know that we did everything for them to have a better life and every opportunity to create an abundant life for themselves and for those that are yet to come after them. So I just want to leave you with this. So if you ever think about when you have different hardships or setbacks, just know that you have also the ability to bounce back, because one day you will be the ancestor that your descendants look back and marvel at how resilient you were in creating the path for them to have a good life. And so if you have any questions, I am happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chairman Cloud. Extremely powerful words, and you're so inspiring. Thank you so much for your presentation. And we will turn it over to Dr. Martine Carcassonne as our final keynote speaker today.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you, Shale, and everyone at the CRO for the invitation. And thank you so much. It's humbling to be on this panel with Professor Gonzalez and Vice Chairman Cloud. Really enjoyed your presentations. Let me pull up my slide deck here. So yeah, my name is Martine Carcassonne. I'm a communication studies professor up here at CSU. Basically, for the last 20 years of my life, I have focused my work on figuring out better ways for people to have the tough conversations they need to have, particularly in diverse communities, to address their shared problems more productively. The problem is that doesn't happen naturally. A lot of my work ties into social psychology and brain science. And unfortunately, our brains are not wired for the kind of conversations that we really need to have to address these tough issues productively. And then you add on kind of an adversarial political system and a media environment that kind of loves conflict and loves drama. And all those things really tend to spark really bad conversations, which undermine our trust, undermine our ability to work together to address our shared problems. So my work now, I started the CPD in 2006. And continue, and it's kind of this ongoing experiment focused on, okay, how can, in at least a local community, how can an organization with some capacity, serving an impartial role, dedicate itself to helping build that collaborative capacity and serve its community to help them have these conversations. And I think that's exactly probably why I'm here, because thinking about the work, the critical work that all of y'all do in our communities, in many ways, y'all are doing the same thing, right? Y'all are trying to spark these ongoing conversations and create connections and create social capital so your community can rise up when it needs to, in particular, to address its shared problems. So now I'm a professor, so I'm not used to talking for 10 minutes. I'm used to talking for at least an hour at a time. But what I put together here in my presentation is just a short little thing to kind of do some key highlights to think about resiliency work in terms of this ongoing conversation. I see my role as a process designer, as a facilitator, as an experimenter, and basically I'm asking y'all to kind of see your role in that way as well, which I'm sure a lot of y'all already do. So I did put, and Jimmy, if you want to go ahead and kind of post this in the chat, or you might have already, I created just a shared Google Doc with some resources, some links to my articles and those type of things. I might pop some other things on there based on the Q&A, but see this more as a you know, just kind of a quick flyby on some of my ideas. But being at CSU, we like to serve the state, so we're hoping it's the beginning of a conversation with some of y'all, and happy to kind of dig in deeper on some of these things. But with this short time period, I'm going to really hit on two things. One is I'm going to share a little bit about my work on social psychology and brain science, because I really see the heart of my work and is this notion of designing processes that try to avoid triggering the worst of human nature and actually can tap into the best of human nature, because that's when we can really kind of take on these problems much more productively. So I did a lot of work about 6 or 7 years ago, diving into the social psychology and brain science. I've got a short article I shared on that resource page about that. If you're really interested, I have about a 60-page like deep dive report that really gets into the weeds that I'm happy to kind of share as well. But these were some of the kind of negative themes that came out from that research. And unfortunately, a lot of that research is some pretty bad news, again, that we're not wired to have the kind of conversations we need to have. You know, we want certainty and consistency. Our brains are wired once they make a decision to defend it. We like simple narratives. We like good versus evil stories. We like stories with a clear hero and a victim and a villain. And once we decide who's playing what role, that lens kind of sticks. We like to gather around like-minded people, make assumptions about them. Humans have a lot of kind of, you know, we'd like to think in terms of us versus them. There's some good with that, especially on the us at a local level that I'll get to. But a lot of it, you know, defining the them, dehumanizing the them, justifying atrocities is unfortunately a big part of kind of human history that we need to understand as we're trying to engage people. And that all leads to us being really bad at kind of listening to the evidence and listening to the facts. And the most important, the last one for me, is we're not very good at dealing with tough choices, with the dilemmas. We try to avoid those, or we have people that strategically frame things as if those don't exist, right? So that individual kind of psychology leads to problems as we try to engage issues out in the public. So this vicious cycle of exaggerated polarization. Some of the good news here is it is exaggerated. We're not nearly as polarized as we think. But there's a lot of people that are getting really wealthy polarizing us. There's a lot of people that are winning elections because those type of strategies work for elections, then don't work so much for governing, right? But I won't go through all the steps here in this short presentation, but we start at the top where I just walk through those individual bias. When we have interactions with people with different biases, it tends to go badly. And then the internet and so many of our public processes in the media contribute to this. And this is this vicious cycle, a negative feedback loop that leads to a pretty bad place where our conversations are, and really depletes our community capacity to have these tough conversations. Now, the good news is the last 5 minutes are what to do about this, and much more optimistic in a way of what we're learning, particularly at the local level, on how to avoid all these things and tap into different resources. So this is one resource I mentioned. I do a lot of work with NCDD, the National Coalition of Dialogue and Deliberation. Really great resource. This I have a link directly to this document on the resource page of just ways of engaging people in much more productive ways. They have a great conference every other year that will be finally back after COVID in Atlanta in the fall. So I encourage all y'all to check that out. But the other half of the research on the social psychology was the good news. There are some really positive aspects of human nature that quality process can tap into. And you know, you see these on the slide right now. These are harder to reach, harder to trigger, less evolved. Right? So a lot of my processes are specifically designed to avoid triggering the negative aspects and, you know, tap these back parts of the brain to tap into these. But this is what we need to kind of get into for us to take on the challenges that our communities have. Right? So for the last 4 minutes here, I'll just kind of touch on one particular tool, a framework that I use that I think will be particularly helpful to you, particularly in, you know, reframing things from an adversarial model to a much more collaborative model, which then, you know, avoids triggering the worst of human nature and taps into the best. A lot of y'all probably familiar with the wicked problems literature coming out of city planning and civil engineers. I have a little bit of a different twist on it because I like to focus it more like a lens through which to see problems instead of like a category of problems. It's a tool in your toolkit that you can step back and say, if I look at this as a wicked problem, how might that change the conversation? And the heart of wicked problems for me is this notion that all problems in some sense involve multiple underlining positive values that don't fit together very well. that have natural tensions and dilemmas, which I already told you our brain is not good at dealing with. So one example, following Vice Chairman Cloud of the importance of water in our state, I create these wicked problem slides as one of the resources we have. And it's my job to make sense of the public discourse and all the noise that are out there and all the different ways individuals can express their opinion and kind of talk past each other, and try to capture all that and identify those underlying values and put them on the table. And this slide shows the wicked problem in two important ways. One is, if you look at each of these boxes, none of these are bad things. And this is the heart of the wicked problems kind of mindset, is you're assuming the wickedness is in the problem rather than the problem being wicked people. The problem here isn't bad people with bad values. It's that the things that we care about have multiple values and they don't fit together very well, and different people will prioritize those differently. The kind of conversations we need to be having is struggling with the natural tensions between these values, but we don't do that naturally. The way our brains want it, the way a lot of kind of framing, political framing and pundits frame it, they want to frame it as only one value is relevant, that I've got a good value and anyone who disagrees with me rejects that value. Our brains love to define the people that we disagree with by what they're against, because that allows us to avoid the tension of bringing out the dilemma. Right? So the three kind of conversations my work tries to do, which I think will be familiar to you in some ways of what y'all are naturally doing. The long-term conversation is this balancing. How do we find the right balance between these different values? Short-term, it might be a recalibration, that we're realizing one value is too dominant, or one value has been left behind, or a new value has been considered. So we need a significant shift. We allow for strong activist voices in this, but we want them within the context of multiple values. Again, anytime a discussion is focused on just one sole value, alarm bells go off, because I know that's going to be a problematic discussion that's going to polarize people. Or ideal in some ways is a transcending conversation, that we tap into that human creativity and we find ways of transcending the tension and creating a win-win. But we don't naturally have the balancing or the recalibrating or the transcending conversation if we have that more simple, polarized conversation available to us, which is what we often get when we're not proactive about building the kind of conversation we need to have. So I got a few other ones that you can look at from different projects. I did this one with CDOT. We did a big project on decarbonization with Platte River Power Authority. I just want to show this one really quick. I show this one often. This is the best example of the transcendent one, the triple bottom line of looking at the importance. This shift in the language, particularly for environmentalists, instead of demonizing the economy, instead of demonizing profit in an adversarial way, they said, no, that's important too. But people are important and the planet's important. Those three individually are all critical. They just don't fit together very well. But when we see it as this tension, that's when we tap into human creativity. And I know the Colorado Resilience Framework does the same thing. It has the social equity, it has the economic vibrancy, and it has the natural kind of world. And you're laying out that tension for people to engage in more productively, right? So to be able to take on wicked problems, we need really high quality conversations, creativity, and action. We don't get that naturally. So our communities have to proactively try to create that capacity, to create the bridging institutions, to create the honest brokers of information. And your offices can be in the middle of all that, right? So earlier I showed the negative vicious cycle. This is the virtuous cycle. We know from the research, the more that you do this work, the easier it is to do. You engage, you develop mutual understanding, you develop trust, you create a learning community. That engagement becomes not just expressing your opinion, but improving your opinion and learning from each other. And that then gives you that potential for collaboration, co-creation, which for me is critical for our communities to actually have the resiliency we want. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Carcason. I'm just blown away at how much information each of you are able to get into a very short amount of time. So thank you so much. I'm going to really quickly here, whoops. Jemmy, if you can help me spotlight everyone really quickly so that we have everyone up here, that would be awesome. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into our question and answer. So again, unfortunately, we're not gonna be able to take questions from the audience at this point in time. So we have just a couple of questions that we have predetermined for our panel here today. So we will go ahead and start with Dr. Gonzalez. When we often speak of resiliency work, we largely talk of the future. And while it's important to take actions today that have a positive impact to help mitigate or avoid disruptions far into the future, why is understanding historical context important in informing that work?
So I think in order to understand any of the issues that we're having today, it helps to, I mean, it's absolutely necessary to understand the roots of those problems. And so looking back at history makes us understand all of the issues that we're dealing with just a little bit better. And in addition, we have a bunch of tools that we can use from history as well.
Great, thank you so much. Vice Chairman Cloud, the next question is for you. Relationships and partnerships, as you spoke to a lot in your presentation, are integral to building collective resiliency. As we move into the future in not only the next 10 years, but for many generations to come, and in acknowledging tribal sovereignty, what partnerships would you like to see happen to strengthen resiliency?
Actually, there's a few, I think. I think it's also real quick, it's important to understand that in Native people haven't been citizens in this own country not until 2024. So with that, you know, there's a lot of historical trauma that goes along with everything that I have talked about before. And so I think I would like to see more collaboration with different organizations to help with the mental health, because we do deal with that. We deal with different other situations, again, health and our lack of housing. And so those are real issues, but also with when it comes again back to our water, we've been left out of all of those conversations, and we want to be able to use our water the way that we see fit, not the way someone else is telling us how to use our water. And so creating those types of relationships and collaborations are really important for us in order for us to keep sustaining life as we move into the future. And so there's many different relationships I think that needs to be developed and strengthened. But we also need to make sure that the federal government fulfills their trust responsibility in everything that they've done, because we have different treaties that are still in effect that they haven't fulfilled those responsibilities for, just like our water infrastructure that I spoke about.
Thank you so much. And the final question we have here for you, Dr. Carkison, what would you change about how governmental entities conduct community engagement work, particularly around polarizing issues, to ensure meaningful engagement?
Yeah, no, part of when I did that research on the social psychology and brain science, right? So the end report that I finished off with, which I can't post publicly, but if you email, I'm happy to kind of share it. In and out, you know, I did learn the bad news, social psychology, learn the good news, and then I had a section of really looking at what are the typical ways we engage people. And we realize how, unfortunately, so much of our public process is not really designed well, right? It's you know, handing the microphone to some of the loudest voices or the most polarizing voices, and there's really not a place for the people. You know, it's more of a collection of individual opinions kind of going past each other. You know, so needing to really upgrade our public engagement is a big part of the work that I do. While also realizing that's a challenge, right? So there's one, I'm going to post a link to one article that's also on that resource page, where I actually looked at, you know, trying to do public engagement is a wicked problem in itself, right? That we want this high quality engagement and we want small groups, but then we also want to be efficient with people's time and money, and you know, and we can't do all those things at the same time. Right. So it makes this distinction in the literature between thin engagement, which is more like surveys or just one time the microphone, and thick engagement was more the deliberative thing. And you're not going to be able to do thick all the time. People don't have enough time to go to all those meetings. But how do you kind of try to negotiate that, and in your own community, build up the capacity? Now, governments have to build up that capacity. A big part is city, county governments for sure, but then also to lean on your community. To lean on your institutions of higher ed if they're available, but your community foundations, your public library, you know, there's lots of organizations. We got a huge project we started last year in Northern Colorado called the Northern Colorado Deliberative Journalism Project, of trying to help local journalism deal with their own crisis, while at the same time have them come help with this democratic crisis. And how can local journalists kind of play this deliberative role? So I think we got to get creative and learn from lots of communities that are figuring out how to really build that capacity and create a culture for this sort of engagement in your community.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, and then we have one final question for each of you, and it's the same question for everyone. So when you envision a resilient future for Colorado or elsewhere, what opportunities do you see that either exist now or in the future that we should be collectively engaged in to achieve this vision? Similarly, are there tools that you are aware of that exist that we can utilize to move us forward?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Chair Clark.
So I don't know if there's any tools, but anything can be created because this world has changed so much drastically, even in the past couple of years because of COVID. We've had to adapt again to a different type of environment. I think as we move into the future, like it was said, we need to help. We need to lean on each other. I think we are our people, again, are our greatest asset, our greatest resource. And so doing those types of maybe they're focus groups or whatnot, because every community is different. Every region is going to be different. And so it can't be a one size fits all. It's going to have to be adaptable to each region, whatever those areas are needing, because it's I don't think there's a good answer to that question.
I'm unmuted, so I'll go ahead and go. Dr. Gonzalez Badger. I think it's exciting. Colorado is at the forefront a lot of this work of my work, right? In terms of this community engagement and experimentation there. The National Civic League is housed in Denver. The Colorado Civic Canopy is a great organization that we partner with. Obviously, I'm up here at CSU. We've got some new grants that we're working on, this rural leadership program, to try to kind of get some more resources to smaller communities kind of across the state. We're hoping to build up our own kind of training arm in a sense to be able to do this work and take it out to more of the states. I think to take advantage, I think Coloradans are pragmatic. They want to solve problems. They don't want to just kind of play politics in a sense. So I think there's a lot of kind of natural impulses here that we can kind of tap into to have the conversations. Because again, I think resiliency have resilient communities. You have communities that know how to talk to each other, that they have the capacity to have these kind of conversations, and you got to be proactive and have that in place. And I know that's the work a lot of y'all are already kind of deeply committed to.
And I would add to that, so I think the power of social media for good, the way that we're connecting now, via Zoom, I think, that all creates like spaces for dialogue. I also think that post 2020, so post the murder of George Floyd, people say we're in this period of reckoning with our racial past. And I think there's a lot of momentum behind that. You're looking at museums who are doing, new exhibits, very carefully negotiated with the people who they're representing. You see in government, for instance, the naming commission that Executive Director Garcia and I serve on, looking at how we've named things in our state, and striving for a more inclusive kind of representation of our state. And then you have more and more people moving to Colorado, bringing from different backgrounds, whether they be from other states or from other countries. And so with that diversity, we become stronger, we become smarter. And so we can jump on some of these trends and harness them for good. So that's what I would like to contribute.
Thank you all so much. You all have such beautiful, powerful words to share with us, and just inspiring visions. And it just goes to show again why it was just amazing to get each of you as our keynote speakers this year. It was such an honor. And I just have to say, I know all of you are so busy, and we are so grateful for your time and sharing your vision with each of us that are here today. So thank you so much. I hope you'll have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you again for being here. And we are going to go ahead and move into the break next. So we are running a little bit behind on time, but as you can see, we had incredible speakers, so we didn't want to rush anything at all. So if we could all be back in 5 minutes at 2:15, we'll go ahead and get started with the rest of our program. So we'll take a quick break, and thank you again to our keynote speakers.
And please come back because we have a special video for you.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. I am so excited to go ahead and turn this over to my colleague, Patrick Garrett, who is also part of our Colorado Resiliency Office as our READY manager, which is the Rural Economic Development Initiative. He has helped to put together a really fantastic video that I'm so excited to share with you all. So go ahead and take it away, Patrick.
Thanks, Shale, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so happy to be here to represent some really great voices from throughout the state who donated their time to talk about what resiliency looks like in Colorado today, and of course, moving into the future. So I want to give a big thank you to all the names that you see on the screen here. They will introduce themselves and talk about the importance of resilience around Colorado. One of our big goals with this video was to be able to highlight some voices of leaders who are in various different parts of their careers, various different industries, organizations, and importantly, throughout the state as well geographically. So we're really excited to share this with you. And without further ado, I will turn it over so that we can start the video.
My name is Ashley Pearl, and I serve as the Community Resiliency Manager for Pickens County.
My name is Jillian Laycock. I am the Assistant Town Manager for the Town of Lyman.
My name is Brian Lujan. I am the Town Manager for the Town of Center, Colorado.
I'm Kathy Pagano. I'm the Assistant County Manager for Gunnison County.
My name is Lori Hodges. I'm from Larimer County, and I'm the Director of Emergency Management.
Hi, I'm Gary Sanfason. I work for Boulder County, and I am the Disaster Recovery Manager.
Laura Lewis Marchino, and I'm the Executive Director of Region 9 Economic Development District of Southwest Colorado.
I'm Renee Muller-Chacon. I'm Executive Director and co-founder of Women from the Mountain, and as of Tuesday, I am a councilwoman for Commerce City Council Ward 3.
For me, a resilient Colorado looks like a big community that recognizes the diversity of interests, the diversity of perspectives, the diversity of voices and backgrounds in our state.
A state that is looking forward, that is proactive, that sees that we're going to have challenges that we're going to have to face that are going to be complex, some of more of those wicked problems, and that there are processes in place to be able to manage those from a broad coalition level, not just a government level.
In the state, I think it's really important that we recognize that this is the new normal and we resource it appropriately.
To me, a resilient Colorado is one where we can respect and support each of those contributions and cultures from our varying regions.
So let's start locally with needs and how does that build to the region, and then how does that build to the state. That is going to make Colorado more resilient than if Colorado is looking completely as a state and going top down.
So that forms of justice and equity that keeps getting ignored or keeps getting erased or keeps being seen as an other can now finally be seen as this is how we're going to heal our communities.
Things that we all know are really important, but elevating them at the level of attention, at the level of funding, and the level of implementation that we really need, because I think we all know if you're a whole person, then you're wholly contributing to the community.
And Resilient Colorado is all of us coming together as one and knowing that the strength of this state, it depends on all of us being strong as one.
Last one I always tell people is look at it like a garden. You help the weakest plants first because all the other strong ones are already going. So it's kind of recognizing it works like that in every other biosphere too.
Thank you again to all of those participants. We got tons of footage, all of which we couldn't use in that short 3-minute space. So I fully anticipate that you'll see other videos where we can get some of their great perspectives from around the state as well. Hopefully you enjoyed some of those perspectives from around the state, and we'll turn it back over to Shale to get us started for the next portion of the summit.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. And yeah, I've seen that video several times now, and I just smile every time we watch it. So I just want to say thank you again to everyone who participated in that video. And we loved hearing all of the different ways local leaders around Colorado envision a resilient future. All right, so we are going to go ahead and start our breakout sessions here in just a moment. But first, we wanted to make sure that we went through and let you all know what the breakouts are going to be, and then we'll provide some instructions for you all for participation for the rest of the afternoon. So let's go ahead and start with the first breakout session. So our first breakout room is going to be collaborating across jurisdictions. So disaster knows no political boundaries. This common adage showcases the necessity of cross-boundary collaboration as communities work to share and scale solutions in pre- and post-disaster resiliency work. In this breakout, we'll discuss how communities have defined and redefined regions based on changing needs. We'll also discuss what makes some collaborations more successful than others and strategies for having collaborations take on meaningful shape. So we have a great panel for this breakout session. We have John Stabney, who's the Executive Director of the Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, as well as Stephanie Gonzalez, who is also the Executive Director of the Southeast Colorado Enterprise Development. In our next breakout, we'll be talking about a climate resilient future. So climate adaptation has become increasingly important as climate change has helped drive a 5-fold increase in the number of weather-related disasters in the last 50 years, according to a 2021 report published by the UN World Meteorological Society or Organization, excuse me, if I can talk today. In this breakout, we'll hear from state, tribal, and local government representatives on how they are integrating climate adaptation into climate action plans, measuring progress, and incorporating climate justice. So we'll be hearing from Jonathan Asher, who is the director of the new Governor's Office of Climate Preparedness and Disaster Recovery. We'll be hearing from Chairman Manuel Hart, who is from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, and Scott Cowman, who is the director of Environmental Health in Routt County. In the next breakout, we'll be talking about data-driven solutions for equitable resilience. So we have never lived in an equitable world, but this does not mean that it is impossible for us to achieve one. Vulnerabilities are created when communities are unable to access needed resources and opportunities due to barriers that exist within our systems and institutions. In this breakout, we will envision what a truly equitable Colorado might look like by grounding ourselves in the progress and successes that have moved us forward as a state, and how best to determine and incorporate data-driven outcomes, and by exploring solutions to overcome the gaps that we continue to face. Again, we have a wonderful panel. We have Jacqueline Stanton, who is our own DOLA EDI coordinator in our Executive Director's Office in our Department of Local Affairs. And we have Michelle Shimamura, who is the Director of the Office of Public Health Practice, Planning, and Local Partnerships at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. All right, and then our final breakout session will be on preparing for disruptions, shifting to a culture of pre-disaster recovery. So many of us have heard the phrase that recovery begins at the time of the disaster. However, pre-disaster recovery planning for disruptions and changing conditions is key. We know that hazard mitigation reduces risks, and preparedness leads to faster and more resilient recovery. In this breakout, we will discuss the shift in perspective that is needed to be resilient to disruptions, natural hazards from natural hazards to pandemics, and how resiliency and pre-disaster recovery planning is the next step in being prepared for the unknown so that we may better adapt and overcome future challenges. This session will explore successes and challenges at the local level in Colorado and how prepared communities impacted by disaster are seeing the benefit. So again, we have great speakers on this panel as well. We have Gary Sampason, who is the recovery manager for Boulder County, as well as Melissa Ryder, who, fun fact, used to be with us here at the CRO, but is now the Community Resilience Coordinator for the city of Arvada, and is also the co-chair of the North Central Region Recovery Committee. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So the breakout rooms will be opening shortly. So just a couple of instructions for you all before we jump in. So in a few minutes, we will open these breakout rooms, and you'll be able to choose the breakout that is most of interest to you by selecting it from the list. Once you enter the breakout, your room moderator will introduce themselves and provide you with additional instructions. However, please note that we very much encourage audience participation in these sessions following the speaker panels. Each breakout session will start with speaker presentations for about 15 minutes. And then following the presentations will be a brief opportunity for question and answer, and then we'll move into facilitated discussion. A Jamboard will be used to capture key themes. And if you have not yet used the Jamboard before, your moderator will be able to provide instructions on how to use that. We are asking that participants in the audience please keep their video off during the breakout sessions during the panel presentation. After panel presentations have concluded, you are welcome to turn on videos to participate in the discussion. The discussion will be about 30 minutes, after which the breakout rooms will close and we'll return to the large group room here again. At this time, each breakout moderator will report out to the larger group on key themes and ideas that arise during the discussion. Please be mindful of the fact that these breakout sessions are being recorded and will be posted to our website following the summit. These sessions are an open space where all perspectives are welcomed. However, please be mindful, considerate, and respectful of one another in these sessions. So thank you again for joining us. And now I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everyone. Sincere apologies once again for the technical issues there. Thank you all for your patience, and hopefully we didn't cut off discussion too much. I'm so sorry that ended up happening. But what we are going to do, instead of doing our report outs at this time, we are going to be providing a takeaway document anyway for our summit today with key takeaways and key resources and all of the things that we talked about today. That's going to be available on our website along with the recording of today's summit and the slides that we've shared with you all today. So we are going to go ahead, for the sake of respecting everyone's time, finish out our last 7 minutes by turning it back over to our director, Ann Miller, to provide a few last-minute resources that the CRO provides for you all and to wrap us up with some concluding remarks. So Ann, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl, and for everyone who has been part of the dialogue today, and especially to our speakers and all those that had a hand in organizing this event. And a special thank you to Cheryl. And we are demonstrating adaptability to technology and other challenges that come our way. So yes, we really are interested in continuing the dialogue. This is really so complex and requires partnerships and deep relationships. So I am very interested to hear from you. An annual resiliency summit isn't quite enough. We have our priority implementation groups for our framework, and we are looking for ways to increase engagement with all of you. So we will be following up probably to get your feedback on to how would you like to continue this conversation. We do have peer exchanges right now and local government coordination calls and opportunities for resources that you can access on our website that Shale's highlighted here on this website. So I'll point out a couple of the resources and flag those for you. So as you think about taking action locally or taking your work to the next level, know that you have this community of resources in the room here. And you also have a website that you can go to for some tools, no matter what you might be trying to tackle. So we do have a resiliency actions and assessment guide. And that's really meant to be a tool for communities to look at how to measure progress and how to think about data to better understand resiliency actions and where we need to focus our attention and energy. So that is available for you. The resiliency dashboard is that kind of looking at data to better understand what are the demographic information and data that helps inform your work. And we have a bunch of toolkits, including a resiliency toolkit. So we really encourage you to do this planning now before you have a disruption so that you're ready and are able to adapt. And really, we are envisioning a community, not just that we are adapting, but we're thriving. And what does that really look like? And building those deep connections and community capacity so that together we can weather whatever comes our way and again be able to thrive in that. So with that, I know we're at time, and I just want to express my gratitude again for all of the amazing leaders we have in this state and for your time and dedication to being part of the summit. And we look forward to partnering with you in the future and continuing, again, that collaboration, idea exchange. And please send us your case studies if you have work that you're doing in your community that you think others could benefit from. We want to hear from you and we want to highlight that. We have a climate webinar series that we will be relaunching this year. It's in collaboration with our state agency partners. And if you have topic ideas or things that you might want to present, we want to hear from you on that as well, and any other technical assistance that might be needed. And we'll put our heads together and see how we can support accelerating the work that we know needs to be done. We've got, again, some complex challenges that we have no choice but to work together to address. So with, again, with gratitude, thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to continuing to work together. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. As I said, this recording will be available following the summit on our website, so keep on the lookout for that. And we will be sending an email out to you all, letting you know when that's up. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and here's to 2023 and 10 years after that, and far into the future after that. So thank you.
And if anyone, I will just say, I will stay on a little longer, Shale, if that's possible.
Sure.
I do feel like we were right in the mid-sentence in some of our breakouts, and I'm just, wanted to give the space for anyone who wanted to just, be able to wrap up some of the conversation. But feel free to go on your way. And again, thank you all.
Hey, Morgan, if you're wanting to say anything, you're on mute, hon.
Oh, yeah. No. I know that in the climate breakout, we were midway through. I mean, I want to respect folks' time. I know coming from the governor's office and the Mountain Ute Tribe, like folks' schedules are pretty tight. But I'm wondering if people do want to continue the conversation, or are there other things we can identify. Would like to provide the opportunity to finish what we were set out to do. Again, there's no pressure and you don't have to answer now, but I would like to offer that since we only got to the first stage of the talk. And the idea would be a lot of this information would be used to inform the Colorado Resiliency Office's, the resources we provide to communities, kind of thinking about the partnerships that we will, folks want to foster and encourage and things like that. In our breakup group, we talked a lot about collaborations and, thinking about also the interrelated systems, whether you're looking at the federal level, state level, local level, and how the work we each do in those spaces affects each other and affects each other's ability to successfully implement climate action. And so, I think we'd like to offer that opportunity to get to you at another time, but do apologize for the cutoff.
And Celeste, Terry, thank you again for, I know you were mid-sentence, so I do want to give you the space, and people have stayed on. If you wanted to complete your thought, feel free.
I mean, it's definitely for the more of the audience. I think I know that Chairman Manuel had mentioned some of the challenges being faced in collecting some of the medicine necessary for a ceremony that we hold. And I really thought that, I actually just recently did a project and shared with the U.S. Forest Service in South Dakota. And I think that the project would be very helpful for Southern Ute as well as the Mountain Ute Reservation or tribes. So I'm hoping to be able to connect with them and share some of that project work.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And, we're happy. Morgan, I know, has been in conversation with Chairman Hart some leading up to this. And if there's any help making that connection, please reach out to Morgan. She can provide her email in the chat, maybe. All right. Well, thank you all. And if no one else has any final words, we will wrap up and have a great rest of your day and week. Thank you.